Okay, welcome to the second part of the video on whether Adani Green will become more like Reliance or more like Suzlon. So in the first part of the video, we saw the positive things, which try to suggest that uh, Adani Green will become more like Reliance and not like Suzlon. So now let's examine the other side and see what leads us to believe that there's some possibility that Adani Green might become like Suzlon. So first, because of this very rapid run up, right, there's a lot of excitement, maybe even among retail investors, saying, how can I get in on this action of Adani Green? And so one of the people who has a very popular YouTube channel actually did a video where I've given a link on whether it's a good investment or not, whether Adani Green is a good investment. So we'll just go to a little part of that video. I just want to show you a few things there. So I'm just waiting. So okay, so here what she's looking at the profit and loss account. So she's showing that the depreciation expense has got down from 106 crores to 39 crores. And the company did nothing special on that. It just changed the accounting policy from written down value method to straight line method. Okay. So they've basically tried to juice up the profit by just changing the accounting. And this is legal, but it's interesting that the company did this. So here she's talking about the exceptional item. 50 and 57 are the notes. So now they have given 191 crores of exceptional items, and about 170 crores of this is for issuance of senior notes where they've refinanced, and they've given an upfront payment of 170 crores, possibly to the refinancer, right? So they have done some financial engineering there. Okay. So I will stop this here because I wanted to just show you this. Okay, and we'll come back to the presentation. Okay, so you can watch this whole YouTube video and make your own conclusions as to what the quality of this video is and the quality of the fundamental analysis that this person has done. But the key point that I want you to think of is that if this group is very straightforward, very, has very high standards of governance and all those kind of things, then it is unlikely to juice up profits by just changing the depreciation method. Okay, it would want to give the true picture to people. Okay, and maybe if the loss is more, then it will show the loss. Okay, so that's a little bit of a red flag to me. The second thing that's there is that why did it pay 170 crores to refinance some of its debt, right? Maybe there was some debt maturing, they wanted to issue this thing. So why did they give like a sweet payment of 170 crores upfront to get, maybe better terms down the road? Now, maybe this is a very common practice. I don't know, but I haven't seen this too often. So to me, this is a little bit of red flag, right? Then the thing is that, if you look at this thing. So there's a case study on this whole Kamuthi solar project. So if you go to the excerpts here on this, you will see what the solar vision and the solar potentials are, what the things are, and how they actually did this Kamuthi project. Now, the interesting thing about the Kamuthi project is that it was finished in 2016. Now, I have been trying to find out that, of this power which was generated, how much power was paid, how much has this resulted in actual revenue. And it obviously has, because there are revenues which are there in the thing, and maybe they've come from Kamuthi, maybe they've come from somewhere else. And maybe if I dig deep enough, there is some breakup available, but I've not done that. Then, how was this power utilized to grow the GDP of Tamil Nadu and create employment in Tamil Nadu or elsewhere in India, right? So the whole argument is that if we have a lot of more of renewable energy, we are going to create so many more jobs, and the economy will grow, and India is a growing economy and it needs that. So from 2016 to 2020, did this really happen? So far, I don't see any compelling evidence to show me that this has happened. So it raises a little bit of a question mark in my mind as to the real pace at which India will progress on these projects. And, if they're unable to attract investment, unable to this thing, then it could create problems for a company like Adani Green, because it has, as we'll see a little later, a lot of debt on its balance sheet. So if you look at the second thing, it also says that the government of Tamil Nadu had launched a solar energy policy in 2012. The vision was to develop 3,000 megawatts of solar energy by 2015. The policy called for development of 1,000 megawatts of utility-scale rooftop and renewable energy certificate projects. Some of the key objectives of the policy were to achieve energy security and attain grid parity by 2015. But by June 2015, the state was only able to execute 5% of the target. And there was a mounting sense of urgency, which expedited the signing of the MOU with Adani, right? So though the Kamuthi project was completed within record time, it had to deal with its share of challenges. The project faced several logistical challenges owing to its remote location, as well as the delays caused by unseasonal torrential rains. Okay, so that was this. Then if you look at case study intro 1, it says opened on September 22nd, 2016, it opened this project, and it cost 680 million at that time. It was completed in less than a year, and said that Tamil Nadu plant restates the country's ambitions to becoming one of the leading green energy producers in the world. And the government of India has a vision to set up 100 gigawatts of solar capacity in the country by 2022, right? So there you have this 648 megawatt project, which was set up in 2016. Now, I have not done enough work to see that from 2016 to now we are in 2020, 4 years of that 6-year window have passed. So how much has, besides this Kamuthi thing, how much more projects have been set up? How successful are they? How many have gone to Adani Green? How many have gone to competitors? And how well and quickly are these things coming on board? What have been the learnings from that? Now, in that investor presentation, I would have expected that this was something that a company would explain. Besides just painting a rosy picture. I don't see that, right? And later on, I don't know if there are analyst reports or who are the analysts who are following them. One of the things which was there in that presentation was that the debt rating of Adani Green is A, which is a pretty good investment grade rating. It isn't even BBB minus. Which is the rating for some people like Reliance or things like that, or even the debt rating seems to be better than the sovereign rating for the country, for Adani Green. So these are some of the questions that I have. Okay, and now this is the press release, which was slightly different when it was issued earlier, but now it has been sort of done as an editor's synopsis. So it won this 8 gigawatt project to be delivered over a period of 60 months. Now, here it's going to deliver this 8 gigawatts over 60 months, while it had delivered 648 megawatts over 9 months, right, in 2016. So now we are in 2020. So its ability to deliver things of like an 8 gigawatt type of scale, it doesn't seem that it can be delivered in 9 months or something like that. But it's going to take 7 times that, or 60 months. So there doesn't seem to be much sort of economies of scale when it comes to delivery time, or there's something which needs deeper digging. The investment is very large, and it will really lead to create 4 lakh jobs, direct and indirect, from this 8 gigawatts of electricity. Now, again, did the 648 megawatts, which was maybe 1/15th the size of 8 gigawatts, did it actually produce 1/15th the number of jobs or not? And this business of CO2, etc. Now, the other interesting thing is that it now has 15 gigawatts capacity under operation, construction, or contract, and moves closer to achieving its 25 gigawatt renewable power target by 2025, right? So now it's going to take 60 months for this win on 2020, which is 5 years. So it's almost close to the 2025 thing. So then if it has a target of 25 gigawatts, then in the next few months, it has to win bids of 10 gigawatts to achieve its target of 25 gigawatts. So if it is saying right now that it's going to, then maybe it is confident of winning these bids, and maybe these bids are there, right? Like, so the government of India has all its processes in place, and it has all its land in place, because it took 2,500 acres to produce 648 megawatts. Now, assuming that there are no great economies of scale, so per acre you only produce X amount of megawatts, then for producing this 8 gigawatts, obviously it has probably a huge land parcel somewhere. I don't know where this project is located. It's obviously going to be a fairly large amount of land, which has to be contiguous for this plant. So that's probably there. And then for the other 10 megawatts, it's again going to need that much land somewhere in the country. So I don't know if that's realistic or not. But I would expect that when it issues this kind of a press release, it has thought that through, because those would be, I think, logical questions that people could ask. Then it's a solar agreement from the Solar Corporation of India. And in addition to the 8 gigawatts, it's also going to make modules for 2 gigawatts. So that's another revenue stream. So, right, but it's going to require investment. And then they're going to not only just, but it's some backward integration that they will do, right? So, it's just that, when people are painting just rosy pictures, I, being a skeptical banker, when I used to work for Citibank, I tend to feel a little amount of discomfort, right? But if someone told me, look, here are the risks, here are how we're going to solve them, here are things which are going to happen. So we'll come to that a little bit later. Okay, so now let's look at this other thing, where basically now you see here that the Tamil Nadu government is suggesting another 500 megawatt solar park in Kamuthi, which is in March of 2020. But as the center recently cancelled the 500 megawatt Kada Ladi solar park project in Ramanath, following the state's failure to acquire land for the project, the power minister has now issued a fresh thing, right? So basically, it seems by reading this that this whole process of acquiring land for solar projects is not really a simple exercise, and it takes very long and may end up delaying a lot of things, right? So this is and Funding had originally made an offer for investment and development of the park on the build own. This is an interim injunction from the court on the acquisition of the land. We said the land could be given only after vacating the stay order, but the center cancelled the project due to lapse of deadline. We have suggested an alternative site in Kamuthi and Ulu Kalathur, the minister said in the assembly, and the union government has assured of the inspection of the site. So I think, this whole business of how fast all these things will proceed is not all that clear. And I'm not very sure that these rather optimistic targets that the government of India has or Adani Green has will be met. Okay, so now let's take another look at this presentation, which we had looked at earlier. Okay, now I'm just going to focus a little bit on the negative parts of this presentation, which caught my eye. So we looked at the positive parts. So sorry, here. Okay, just a minute. Yeah, here. So one of the things when we were looking at the group, the very large amount of promoter holdings, like I would ask you to note this, right? The very large amount of promoter holdings to me is a red flag. And as we go through this presentation, I will explain why. Okay, so that was one thing which to me was a bit of a negative. Okay, right. Now, the other aspect here is that, India keeps talking about the ease of doing business. Now, if this thing, so one of the key competitive advantages that Adani Green has is that it's very difficult to do this business in India. But Adani Green has a competitive advantage because it knows how to do this, right? So now if this becomes easy and a very large number of players come in, would Adani Green's competitive advantage get eroded, right? Because it has this whole competitive advantage, which is no longer really required. Okay. Now that of course may not happen, but it's something to think about. Okay. So the rest of it we go on. Right. So this cost advantage that they have in terms of winning bids, if the whole landscape changes and it becomes very easy to deal in India, then a large portions of the cost go away, and maybe there would be very deep-pocketed players with a lot of equity who are able to come in and deliver things and get a large market share in this supposedly very attractive market in India. And if Adani Group does not have very deep equity pockets, and is financing things with debt, which may be a great way to finance these projects. But it may lose competitive advantage to a more deep-pocketed player. And this might become relevant in some of the later parts of the presentation in part 3, but keep that in mind. Okay, then we have all this grid and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we talked about how this is all going to get integrated into the infrastructure and all. But again, like, is this correct, right? Because, so how good has the integration been with some of the projects which are already mainstream? So is this a risk or is this not a risk? I do have no idea. But that would certainly be a question that I would ask. Right. So these solar PV modules and all those kind of things, so if there's no risk that this PPA will get cancelled or whatever, then that's all fine. But if the technology improves and the cost of producing this power reduces, then the newer plants will produce very much more efficiently things, but that may not be such a risk because Adani will then be able to source better technology and offer better rates to win the tenders and so on and so forth. But again, it's something to think about. Right, so this goes on. Okay, now here, so we looked at this Kamuthi thing. So, the fact that it has been able to do it, but can it replicate it? Are all the problems sorted out, etc., etc., is something to be looked at. And all these projects and all that. Okay, so now we already talked about the very large holding structure for the promoter, why that, and we'll see why that could be a problem. We see that the revenue is 1412 crores, the EBITDA is 1275, so they have fairly low operating expenses, which is good. But the assets that they have is 14,220 crores. So that is a lot of capex that they have to do as so their assets to revenue kind of thing is this. And the credit rating, they say, is stable and A. So I don't know what this IND A stable means and who's the rating agency and what is this rating now. And then they talk about their pan-India portfolio and then the fact that they're going to have all this 4.5 gigawatts under production by FY21, and then they're going to add more and more stuff to reach their targets. That's their operational performance and so on. So now, when you come to the financials statement, this line here, the net external debt by EBITDA is 5.2x, right? So they have a lot of debt compared to their earnings before interest, taxes, and depreciation and amortization. So this is something which would be very worrying from this thing. So the rest of it, we can. So they have something about their debt philosophy and all those kind of things. So I have not gone deeply into it, but this very large amount of debt and the risk is very key. Because if this risk is not covered well and you have bad events, maybe like COVID-19 or whatever, then it could lead to a Suzlon-like outcome because they don't have a lot of staying power in their balance sheet, right? And so this could be more like a Suzlon kind of outcome, right? So now when we look at the risks, so there is delay, there is a production risk, there is a counterparty default in the sense, not default, but delay, because they're selling, like the state governments have to pay them this tariff, It's not as if they can just discontinue the supply. They don't have many retail customers and all that, right? They have one person who pays them, which is the state government, and so on and so forth. So I think, with the power trading corporation and all that, maybe they can supply to the grid, and then the grid, other states can buy it, etc., etc. So they don't have a single state dependency and all that kind of stuff. But, like just now, the government had to bail out the states so that they could pay the power discoms and stuff like that. So again, I mean, there are a fair amount of risks in this particular sector. And then if some of these risks all go away, right, then, could there be a glut? Like at one point in time, oil was flying high, but now like oil and gas is in deep trouble. So how do you have an extremely efficient structure with very good market share, with extremely good management, and so on and so forth, may be very critical to the winners in the space. Now, the biggest problem why I am concerned that we might have a Suzlon-like case, and this is the systemic thing that I was talking about, is the skin in the game of the promoters, right? So the promoters initially put in a little bit of money. They won contracts. Based on the contracts, they raised a lot of debt, right? Then, the stock price got pumped up. Maybe some of the group companies bought stock. 86% was owned by the promoters. So there's very little stock that is necessarily traded. So how much of this price rise was through pumping up? And have the promoters indirectly been able to withdraw a fair amount of whatever money they had put in, and things like that becomes a key concern. And then you have this whole very high debt. So what is happening here is that if you had a financing structure where the promoter put in money at X, then they got more equity, which was at a higher price, and they kept their debt to equity ratio under control, and then they got more equity. So either they put in more money or they got diluted. That would give us more comfort that the promoter has tremendous skin in the game. So if you take a person like Elon Musk, who is like investing in Tesla, you see that he puts in a fair amount of his own money, almost gets bankrupt at various times, then he recovers and things like that, and then he's very, very rich. But he's taking huge bets with his own money and not just with other people's money. So my concern is that in the Adani Group or in such structures, and I'm not focusing only on the Adani Group, do they have enough skin in the game? Or is all the risk being really assumed by the debtors? Because the debtors have no real massive gain if the projects do very well, but they have all the downside. So the risk alignment seems to be very weak here, and it increases the probability of Suzlon-like outcomes. So now we are going to talk about, in the next part of this, what are some of the implications of all this for the country. So thank you very much for listening to the Suzlon case, which concludes part 2, and we'll look at the country thing in part 3.